Welcome to the Cincinnati Asian Art Society's February 15th, 2026 program. I'm Helen Rinsberg, President of the Society. Our presentation today is Transform Glamour, Avant-Garde Japanese Fashion Design. We're happy that you could join us today to celebrate Mary Baskett and her transformative donation of an outstanding collection of contemporary Japanese fashions to the Cincinnati Art Museum. First, I want to introduce Mary Baskett. There we go. And thank her for joining us today. Ms. Baskett was the curator of prints at CAAS from 1965 to 1971. She's a specialist in both Western and Japanese prints and is a published author on the graphic arts. While at the museum, she was instrumental in building one of the world's finest collections of 20th century Japanese prints. Her commitment to Japanese fashion was recognized with the Minister of Foreign Affairs Tokyo Commendation Award in 2010 for her contributions to culture exchange in the field of art. Ms. Baskett was the owner of Mary W. Baskett Galleries in Mount Adams and was previously an adjunct professor at the University of Cincinnati. So let's all thank Mary for all that she has done for the museum. Today's lecture is about the incredible fashions that are part of Ms. Baskett's gift. Her generosity will also endow the Curator of Fashion Arts and Textiles position, marking the museum's first endowed curator, and will lead to the opening of CAAM's first dedicated fashion gallery, expanding the stewardship and exhibition of the collection. She has built her extraordinary collection since the 1960s, and her donation includes her compilation of art history research, which is extensive. Our speaker today is Megan Nauer, Acting Curator of Fashion, Arts, and Textiles at CAAM. She is a fashion scholar and art museum professional. She has worked in the Fashion, Arts, and Textiles Department at the Cincinnati Art Museum's Curatorial Division since 2022. Her career began before curatorial work included research, writing, and reporting on contemporary fashion, editorial publishing, and arts marketing and communication here at CAAM. She holds a degree in journalism from Columbia College, Chicago, and was under the longtime tutelage of curator Cynthia Amneas. She is currently pursuing a master's degree in art history while stewarding the collection at the Cincinnati Art Museum. She is an avid dress historian, as well as an ardent fan and collector of contemporary designers. Her scholarly and personal interests investigate how the history, present, and future of fashion and the psychology of style of fashion positions this art form within the wider scopes of art history, curatorial zeitgeist, or cultural zeitgeist, and human communications. Let's welcome Megan Nauer. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Helen. And thank you very much to the Cincinnati Asian Art Society for inviting me to speak today. Approaching this talk, I considered from many vantage points how to broach the connections between three such iconoclastic designers whose work I respect and appreciate so much. Issey Miyake, Rei Kawakubo, and Yohji Yamamoto, three luminaries from Japan, have each individually so influenced the landscape of contemporary fashion. They have also each, at many points, shared that they do not necessarily wish to be defined by their nationality. Rei Kawakubo once put it simply to a journalist, saying, "I am not very happy to be classified as another Japanese designer. There is no one characteristic that all Japanese designers have." Indeed, all three of them have chafed at various points against attempts at overly simplistic categorization. Even the term which I have chosen to use to evoke the nature of their work, avant-garde, is one which Yohji Yamamoto specifically chose to address and pick apart. To label an artist or their work avant-garde is typically to indicate innovative, radical experimentation. In fashion, it does sometimes become overused, reducing it to an industry indicator for designers who are just sort of out there, a reduction which Yamamoto resented. In his 2011 memoir, My Dear Bomb, he wrote about being frequently defined this way by the fashion industry, saying, "In its original sense, the term simply meant being a little ahead of the pack. But what does it mean now? It is rather easy to imagine and create wildly fantastical clothing with no regard for the realities of the world. The real radical approach to fashion design," he went on to say, "lies in making clothes which are wearable and acknowledge reality, while simultaneously providing a glimpse of the solutions and surprises that tomorrow will surely bring." Solutions and surprises, I think, get at the spiritual similarities between the work of these designers. And though they are correct to resist being defined by nationality alone, cultural history and technique have certainly informed their work, however abstracted the influences may become. Sometimes it takes the work of collectors and scholars to name and unpack these quiet but insistent connections that simmer in the back of the mind when we view works by such distinctive artists. We are lucky enough to have Mary Baskett here with us today, a collector who has been with each of these designers through the entire arcs of their careers. Mary's attuned eyes have seen the value in the creative output of these artists since they first began making headway into the global design space. And over her life collecting and living with and living in their work has drawn together a collection reflective of her deep scholarly knowledge of Japanese aesthetics. Helen did a little bit of the introduction for me, but I would like to go on to say, with her many years of teaching at UC DAP, Mary has furthered scholarship on and appreciation for art from Japan here in our community and far beyond. I find in her collection of fashion many connections to our other collecting areas at CAM, which I am eagerly beginning to research and explore. Thanks to Mary's foresight and commitment to the art of fashion here in our city, her wonderful collection in future will join the museum's collection, greatly enhancing our holdings of contemporary fashion. And a gallery established in her name will expand our ability to display and interpret this collection and draw out the study of these connections for all. So I'd like to take one more moment to thank Mary for these contributions. So today, I'm going to introduce you to each of these three designers. I will give an overview of their lives and careers. We will look at some highlights of their careers and aspects of their design work unique to each. And along the way, I will highlight some ways that each has taken aspects of Japanese artistic methods, principles, or historic dress and interpreted them for their own methods. I will also note here and there a commonality in their design approaches which I find impactful and which will be an area of ongoing study for me. Each of these designers has played with and broken with Western conventions of gendered dress and have subverted cultural signifiers of femininity in fashion. As we begin our introduction to each of these designers and these thematic connections, I would like to note that while I know quite a bit about each of their careers and impacts on contemporary fashion, I am certainly in the early stages of deeper research into the aspects of Japanese cultural history and practice which inform them. And I humbly submit that many in this particular room will have much to teach me. So I very much look forward to the Q&A and conversations to follow. The first designer we'll discuss is Issey Miyake. Issey Miyake was born in April 1938 in Hiroshima, Japan. He survived the bombing of Hiroshima at only 7 years old. His mother, tragically, was one of the innumerable who died 7 years later in her case from radiation poisoning. While he did not frequently overtly address his childhood and the fallout of this tragedy, Miyake carried deeply personal memories of the bombing through his life, and much of his career coincided with the Cold War. In 2009, he penned a heartfelt piece for the New York Times, reflecting on the threat of atomic weapons and the state of global conflicts, and offering support for then-President Barack Obama's pledge to create a nuclear-free world. This piece was perhaps the most personal thing any of the three designers has shared regarding the effects of their early life on their political and humanitarian views. Miyake has said that the overwhelming loss of his mother at such a young age motivated him throughout his career and life to create work which could be a joyful embrace and celebration of life. Miyake moved to Tokyo in his early 20s to study at Tama Art University, graduating in 1964. Officially, he studied graphic design, but his pursuits were always interdisciplinary. Miyake argued from his university days for fashion's role in connecting various artistic and industrial design principles. At the 1960 World Design Conference in Tokyo, he wrote a letter expressing his dissatisfaction with the omission of fashion from the program, and went on to stage a fashion show titled A Poem of Cloth and Stone that made an argument for the contributions of fashion photography to visual culture. After graduation, he moved in 1965 to Paris, where, based on the merit of his work at Tama University, he enrolled at the renowned school of the Parisian Haute Couture Syndicate, or L'École, simply meaning the school, as it is known in the fashion industry. From 1966 until 1970, he worked behind the scenes in ateliers operated by some of 20th century fashion's legends: French couturiers Guy Laroche and Hubert de Givenchy in Paris, and American designer Geoffrey Beene in New York. In 1970, he returned to Tokyo and established Miyake Design Studio, quickly gaining commercial interest in his early clothing. He showed a collection for the first time overseas in New York in 1971, and participated in the official Paris Fashion Week schedule for the first time in 1973, where he continued to present collections twice a year for the rest of his life. All in all, his work in fashion would span more than 50 years, lasting until his death in Tokyo in 2022. His house, now a thriving global enterprise under the creative direction of one of his protégés, Satoshi Kondo, continues to show new collections at every Paris Fashion Week today. Early on, his creations often drew comparisons to origami, and pleats became such an integral feature of his art and a huge commercial success that some called him the king of pleats. Taken on the whole, his life's work challenges us to look at the intersections rather than the boundaries between art, fashion, and design. Going back to early in his career and the beginning of Mary Baskett's days collecting his work, in this spring-summer 1977 pink and orange ensemble, the very first cataloged in Mary's collection, we can see this very beautiful gradation of color, also present in the blue coat next to it from a 1984 collection. These beautiful blurred color graduations are reminiscent of the Chusen dye technique used frequently to color yukata, lightweight summer kimono. The soft, flowing graduation of color is called bokashi. Bokashi translates as blurring colors and has applications in printmaking, silk painting, and ceramic glazing as well. In textile dyeing, it is achieved usually by multiple dips in different dye baths to achieve a subtle, hazy, even painterly blending of one color to another, or fade of a single color from deep to pale. Here, in the cotton top, it has been achieved through dyeing, and in the woven pants through masterful programming of an industrial loom to mimic the dye technique. This mixing of heritage methods and technological advancements in creating infrastructure to manufacture them is a recurring theme of Miyake's innovative career. Also, in spring-summer 1984, we can see the influence of monpe, or loose utilitarian workwear, another theme Miyake frequently revisited and expanded upon in his early designs and in his ongoing plantation subline. Rendering these silhouettes in rustic natural materials, such as the cotton and linen slub knits used for these garments, draws some connections between Miyake's work and the Minge-hin movement. Roughly translating to art of the people, this concept celebrates the beauty and pride in skillful craft inherent in the creation of functional, handmade everyday objects. Layering and remixing these garment shapes was one of Miyake's ways of honoring everyday dress. There are subtle construction details in these garments, in addition to the textiles they are made of and their overall shapes, which reference elements of dress that would be familiar to many Japanese and curious to Westerners. The breast pocket of this jacket, as in many of Miyake's pieces, is set into the chest horizontally. I will say that whenever design students visit the collection and see this piece, they always notice this detail immediately. While in Western garment construction, we are accustomed to vertical pockets, these horizontal chest pockets are comparable to the futokuro, the pocket-like space between the inner and outer layers of kimono at the chest, used as a storage space for essential items or personal, important things that one would want to keep close to the chest or near to the heart. Taking the kimono as a foundational unit of fashion design, Miyake has said, "I learned about the space between the body and the fabric from the traditional kimono. Not the style, but the space." We see Miyake explore that inspiration and that concept of vital in-between space from the beginning of his career and again in different iterations throughout. In 1977, Miyake presented a show at the Seibu Museum of Art in Tokyo to coincide with the 1976 Mainichi Design Award. Though he had been designing and selling clothes since 1970 and showing in Paris since 1973, Miyake cited this as one of his first, proudest endeavors, linking his work in fashion design even more inextricably with that of the wider art and design world. The show, entitled A Piece of Cloth, or Ichimai no Nuno in Japanese, and shortened to APOC, explored his ambition to create original concepts from designs which would be timeless. He began with the graceful simplicity of a kimono's construction, flat pieces sewn in straight lines, and proposed a multiplicity of ways in which a two-dimensional unit of fabric could be draped to envelop the human form. Miyake carried this exercise forth throughout his career, constantly studying and evolving the textiles and manufacturing methods from which a simple piece of cloth can be made. For nearly 20 years, he worked with his friend and collaborator, the textile designer Dai Fujiwara, on developing the APOC concept. In his Spring-Summer 1999 collection, given this title, they would show how far they had pushed their methods. On the runway, Miyake and Fujiwara presented garments made on rolls of tubular jersey, perforated where they should be cut to create openings for the body. The two-dimensional rolls of jersey were knit from a single thread. A single uninterrupted thread with the aid of an industrial knitting machine programmed by sophisticated computer modeling. Through this manufacturing method, factories were able to produce garments with zero waste. Miyake also explored the fun and theatricality he saw as inherent to this manufacturing method, showing Miyake studio workers cutting out the garments from the rolls and dressing models in them on the spot, and sending models down the runway for the finale in a long, completely connected train of vibrant red jersey. Here you can see an APOC piece from Mary Baskett's collection, first hanging flat on the wall and then on the mannequin, cut out and assembled into its component parts, a skirt, socks, gloves, and a bag, all from the same scored round of fabric. Miyake would continue his tech-focused exploration of textile manufacture and manipulation to create his most recognizable design hallmark and explore the expansive concepts of mu and ma. In 1989, he presented his first iterations of pleated garments. Here is a stunning red dress from this season in Mary's collection. Until this point, pleats were always sewn, and clothes were cut and sewn from previously pleated material. Miyake worked with a Japanese engineering firm to create a machine that used heat to permanently press pleats into his unique blend of polyester jersey without melting the fabric. To create these pieces, Miyake patterned massively oversized garments, 3 to 5 times the eventual size of the finished product. These were folded, ironed, and sewn first, then precisely pleated with interleaved layers of paper, and finally heat pressed. When finished, the pleats were left permanently in the pieces, even after washing and wearing. This technique, which created pieces that are lightweight, shape-retaining, yet enormously expandable and flexible, opened up avenues for collaborations with modern dance companies and other performers, which would last for the rest of Miyake's lifetime, as well as experimentation with space and expansion in pleated pieces like this 2002 flying dress and 2014 collapsible lantern-shaped dress from Mary's collection, and in his 1990 Rhythm Pleats series. All of these objects utilize mu, or purposeful emptiness, as well as ma, integral space, or purposeful laden pause. In its application in clothing, ma is an all-important space between the body and cloth, which creates shape while allowing the body to move freely, rather than forcing shape using cloth to form the body, as we see throughout the history of Western tailoring. Miyake played with applications of his pleating endlessly. An example that I'm very fond of is this ensemble from 2007 in Mary's collection, which is a pleated garment that also incorporates long gloves mimicking manicured hands, and creates a kind of altered second skin, or an overdress of a female body to wear atop one's own body. It's fairly commonplace to describe clothing as second skin, but Miyake explored this in many capacities, from skin-hugging knitwear to cheeky pieces like these. As early as 1973, he used the intriguing phrase hifuzukuri, translating to skin making, to describe his process. This commitment to dressing women and all people in a way that allowed for functionality, comfort, and joyful movement through life, and the idea of making inhabitable clothing that functioned as one's own expressive skin, would greatly influence Miyake's contemporaries, 2 of whom would arrive in Paris a few years after him in 1982. Rei Kawakubo of Comme des Garçons is widely regarded as one of the most visionary, influential, and inscrutable designers working today. For nearly 5 decades, her designs have subverted garment shape and function, reframed ideas of beauty, and proposed a new relationship between body and dress. In her endeavor to make clothes that, as she puts it, did not exist before, Kawakubo endeavors to, again in her own words, conceptually start from zero with each new collection. Kawakubo was born in Tokyo in 1942. She had a strong female role model in her mother, who left her marriage with Kawakubo's father when he would not allow her to work outside the home, taking her daughter with her to raise. Kawakubo studied aesthetics and literature at Keio University in Tokyo, graduating in 1964. Pursuing independence like her mother, she left home after college and took a position in the advertising department of Asahi Kasai, an acrylic fiber textile manufacturer. She attained relative creative freedom based on early successes there, and appointed herself head of efforts to collect props and costumes for photo shoots. When she could not find appropriate costumes to express her ideas for styling shoots, she began to make her own clothes to dress models in, ultimately leading her to her beginnings in fashion design. In 1967, she became a freelance stylist. She mixed her own designs into her styling business under her chosen moniker, Comme des Garçons, translating to like the boys, or the perhaps even more subtly subversive, like some boys. From the beginning, she focused on style with street appeal, offering women clothes designed for mobility and with an androgynous edge. By 1969, Kawakubo was selling her designs under the CDG label to shops in Tokyo, and in 1973 she opened her own first store. Commercial success in Japan came relatively quickly for her. Within a decade, she had 150 shops across the country, with a loyal following known as the Crows, so called because of the designer's preference for black, a shade she herself is perennially dressed in, and which she has described as comforting, strong, and expressive. Ever since this initial commercial success, Comme des Garçons has grown into a commercial powerhouse with many sub-labels and many designers, now successful in their own rights, designing under the CDG umbrella. Two of her protégés with their own acclaimed lines include Junya Watanabe and Kei Ninomaya. With her business partner and husband, Adrian Joff, Kawakubo established Dover Street Market in 2004. They created the first of these stores in London to foster, as she put it, a beautiful chaos, mixing emerging designers, established luxury labels, streetwear, art, and food under the same roof. Now with 7 global locations, the enterprise has become an incubator and a proving ground for young experimental designers. Despite her highly abstract and theoretical approach to her own designs, in interviews, Kawakubo has repeatedly and somewhat confoundingly described herself as a businesswoman, not an artist. Nevertheless, her work has been the focus of several major art museum exhibitions, including the Metropolitan Museum of Art's 2017 show, Art of the In-Between. Kawakubo is the second of only 2 living designers to date to have monographic exhibitions at the Met's Costume Institute. In curator Andrew Bolton's interview with Kawakubo and the accompanying catalog, Kawakubo shares that she was eventually won over to the idea of a retrospective by his willingness to collaborate on the exhibition's design, and the opportunity for her to present her work on her own terms, in an all-encompassing, highly curated environment. Famously unwilling to talk much or in a straightforward fashion about herself or the psychology of her designs, Kawakubo has nonetheless become the subject of great recognition and admiration in the press over the decades, labeled at various points fashion's purest visionary by the New York Times and the most free-thinking of all today's fashion designers by the Business of Fashion. When she first came to show in Paris in 1982, however, she entered to much more mixed attention. Kawakubo entered the Paris scene with a stir with her fall 1982 collection titled Holes. Despite her commercial success in Japan, in an era of European fashion where body-conscious design and over-the-top glamour prevailed, some critics received Kawakubo's clothes as an affront to their taste. Before a small audience at the Intercontinental Hotel, Kawakubo presented a collection of oversized, layered, and enveloping asymmetric garments, almost entirely in black, alongside fellow designer and at that point romantic partner, Yohji Yamamoto. Using contrasting textures, fabrics, and cotton quilting inserts, she created a new and more voluminous look, different from her previous work, and very different from the other designers on the ready-to-wear schedule. One critic dubbed the look apocalyptic or worse, while another French writer, in a particularly callous and reductive racialized remark, witheringly dubbed her and Yamamoto's collections Hiroshima chic. Hiss. Nevertheless, Kawakubo came back the very next season, spring-summer 1983, with more variations on the themes from Holes, in a collection she called Patchworks and X, and the ingenuity of her designs began to break through to the Parisian and global audience. Holes famously included a dropped stitch sweater, created by deliberately configuring knitting machines to produce this effect. It's seen here on display with a dress from the same season in the Textile Museum's exhibition of Mary Baskett's collection in 2010. Both Holes and Patchworks and X put an emphasis on deconstruction and a deliberate aesthetic of dilapidation, relating to boro, or literally ragwear, a term for clothing patched together and repaired as daily workwear by Japanese farmers. As boro used and reused worn-out garments for patching material, Kawakubo created garments for the runway using exposed seams, intentionally frayed edges, and incomplete forms. In these unbleached cream cotton pieces from spring '83, she uses patchwork in the form of joined, wrinkled ribbons. Across both collections, she uses patches dyed with different shades of black ink mixed from charcoal, in a method normally used in Japan for creating calligraphic ink. Kawakubo also shows an interest in heritage dye methods in subsequent collections. In spring-summer 1984, a collection she called Indigo Dye and Twist, she created this dress, the detail on this side here, using a shibori technique called Miura shibori. In this resist dyeing technique, a thread is wrapped just once around each small section of fabric without knotting it. The result is a pattern with blurred light blue outlines rather than pure white dots. Here, she has created a geometric pattern in the negative space between the dotted areas. In the 1984 collection, which she called Twist, Silk, and Patchworks, she created this printed ensemble referencing katazome, or stencil-dyed indigo, on modern rayon weave rather than the more traditional cotton. In this print, Kawakubo updates popular 19th century motifs of chrysanthemums and scrolling vines, and incorporates sashiko, a reinforced straight stitch quilting pattern. And in 1985's mud-dyed collection, seen here in Mary's collection, she uses aniline or chemical dyes to recreate shades of deep brown and nearly black blue historically achieved with dorozome, a dye method in which fabric is dyed with a fermented hawthorn plant extract, then immersed in iron-rich mud to create a natural chemical reaction, deepening the plant dye shades. Following her 1980s exploration of layered and enveloping forms, Kawakubo in the 90s began to lean toward a new vision of androgyny, based around her own visions for tailoring and an interrogation of traditionally feminine signifiers in the fashion world. She named her fall 1992 collection of severe black ensembles Lilith, after the mythical figure banished from the Garden of Eden for disobeying Adam, saying that her vision for her mostly purple-wigged models was to create a cadre of she-demons. In 1995's collection, titled Transcending Gender, she showed 100 ensembles in variations on deconstructed tailoring, adding and subtracting elements like ruffles and skirts, playing with the idea of what elements of Western tailored construction belong to what gender, ending in a striking series of smoking jackets over many layered skirts and straight cigarette trousers. For both Transcending Gender and fall 1999's Transformed Glamour collection, from which today's talk takes its name, she styled models' hair in spit curls and French twists, old Hollywood-style markers of a past era, creating a wonderful tension sitting atop ensembles of remixed suits. In Autumn-Winter 2005's Broken Bride collection, Kawakubo took the French couture show convention of ending a collection presentation with a bridal look and turned it on its head in a show presenting 36 iterations of her idea of bridal looks in white and in black, presenting a completely alternative proposition for women's romantic dress, which Kawakubo said she intended as anti-conservatism. Here we see a dress and a jacket from Mary's collection from this series, as well as an iteration of those pieces on the runway. From the 20-teens to today, Kawakubo's visions have become further and further abstracted, theoretical explorations of what constitutes clothing, veering quite distinctly into the realm of what she calls wearable sculpture. We see the first biggest jump into this territory in Autumn-Winter 2012's Two Dimensions collection, often referred to as the Paper Doll collection, seen here in Mary's collection and on the runway, and with an accidental Issey Miyake piece. Beyond their flat, solid colors and exaggerated, stiff, doll-like shapes, the actual construction of these garments does evoke the construction of the kimono. Like a kimono, each is made of a completely flat front and back panel stitched together. They lie completely flat and two-dimensional when off the body. It is only when they envelop a body that they take on three-dimensional shape. Only on the unique form of the wearer do these pieces take their form. These ideas of garment construction, influenced by the abstract form of the kimono, designed not to mold the body, but to create something mysterious around it, and the desire to break down norms and convention in favor of a more universal beauty, are common ground between Kawakubo and the last of our trio of designers. Yohji Yamamoto was born in Shinjuku Prefecture, Tokyo in 1943, 2 years before the United States bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He has called the Tokyo of his childhood a burned-out plain. Yamamoto was raised by his mother Fumi, an accountant who originally helped run the family business. His father, a food supplier and avid amateur photographer, was killed in combat in the Philippines when Yamamoto was just a year old. His remains were never recovered, and Fumi buried his beloved Leica camera beneath her husband's grave marker. In a 1989 documentary by his friend, the filmmaker Wim Wenders, Yamamoto said, "When I think of my father, I realize that the war is still raging inside me." Yamamoto is perhaps the most outspoken of these three designers about the impact the war had on his home country and life. After her husband's death, Fumi took up dressmaking as a trade she could mostly conduct from home while raising her son. She later expanded her operation to her own custom establishment. Yamamoto showed an inclination toward fashion from an early age, winning a grade school competition to design his school's sport uniforms. At his mother's request, he pursued a law degree, graduating from Keio University in 1966. After graduating and traveling, however, he realized a law career was not for him, or as he put it, "I could not bring myself to participate in society in this way." Yamamoto told his mother he'd had a change of heart and that he'd like to work in her dressmaking shop. She was so furious that she didn't speak to him for weeks. But eventually, she accepted her son's wishes with one stipulation. She told him if he was serious about picking up the trade, that he should enroll in fashion school and at least learn how to cut and drape cloth properly so that the other seamstresses would not make fun of him. As she wished, he enrolled at Bunka Fashion College, now famous for training designers including Kenzo Takada and the previously mentioned Junyo Watanabe. After graduating from Bunka, Yamamoto received a prize to live and study in Paris for a year. Following this, he returned to Tokyo to explore his own design voice. After a few years working in his mother's shop, at the age of 29, Yamamoto launched his own ready-to-wear line for women called Wise, with a defined idea. "I wanted women to be able to wear more masculine clothes," he has said, referring to his idea of course correction away from the body-conscious movements of the time. "I thought, let's make dignified clothes that working women will want to buy for themselves with their own money." This notion proved challenging to succeed with at first, but at the same time as Rei Kawakubo's Comme des Garçons began to gain a following, a demand emerged for what he has called his colorless, strong, blocky clothes. He and Kawakubo worked together to gain real estate on department store floors across the country. For a handful of years, spanning their first Paris shows, they were in a romantic relationship, about which they have been fairly close-lipped. Yamamoto has said, "Kawakubo's sensibility was close to my own in terms of use of color and materials. Or rather, I thought her sensibility might be stronger and clearer than my own." Since those early times, we have become kindred spirits in a friendly rivalry, sharing the same values in clothes making and as fashion designers. When Yamamoto arrived in Paris to show his collection for the first time, he'd already been designing ready-to-wear for nearly 10 years. The French press reaction which Kawakubo faced encompassed Yamamoto as well, but he has always been an ineffable spirit and very publicly an anti-establishment romantic. He wrote in his memoir, "At first, of course, I was considered a Japanese designer who had come to France as a sort of migrant worker, but after releasing 6 or 7 collections, people began to treat me as a Parisian designer. However, a part of me has always been like a child secretly working his mischief. With my work, I was turning my back to stick out my tongue at the world, so when they praised me for it, I immediately felt uneasy." Embrace of that outsider status and sense of mischief have inspired dedicated fans of his line for more than 50 years. His 1982 debut with Kawakubo acted as a fraternal twin and complement to her ideas, playing with volume and layering, all in black. Yamamoto's musings on the color black include his famous statement, "Black is modest and arrogant at the same time. Black is lazy and easy, but mysterious. But above all, black says this, I don't bother you, you don't bother me." His spring 1983 collection, also showed in tandem with Kawakubo, also expanded to include cream tones, and used his own variation on intentionally distressed machine knitting, creating holes and shreds reminiscent of Boro. In his autumn-winter 1986 collection, Yamamoto presented an entirely new proposition, posing questions about how different cultures and eras construct ideals for the female body. He showed sharply tailored coats and dresses, reminiscent of Victorian-era English style, split and exploding from the back in tulle parodying a bustle, cheekily recoding this formal 19th century silhouette. The pieces, literally buttoned up in front, directed attention firmly to the back. Yamamoto cited as inspiration ukiyo-e prints, in which idealized female figures are often viewed in a sweeping curve from the back. He also said of the collection that for him, it was at least partially about questioning why the West has authority over modern beauty standards. While envisioned as protest, the looks nevertheless demonstrated his mastery of tailoring and adaptability within widely varied construction techniques, and riffed on the silhouettes in fall 1995 with layered and bustled coats, achieving movement with modern mesh and light wool gabardine that took stiff structure to create in the 19th century. Again, in fall 2008, he revisited the bustle, seen here in a textured yellow wool skirt with an all-around voluminous roll at the waist, and a peplum blazer with contrast stitching from Mary's collection. In autumn-winter 2006, Yamamoto presented a collection of loose, flowing, greatly voluminous suiting, draped and cinched and manipulated with a dressmaker's hand. In it, we can see some of the influence of Montpe explored by Miyake in his early work, as well as a sensitivity to ma in the flowing, malleable space between the body and the garments. In a striking twist, many of the garments in the collection are shapeshifters. They contain extra arms, leg holes, and openings, which allow the wearer to choose the shape and presentation or tone of the garment. In this suit in particular, the jacket with extra arms can be worn as a more Western-looking blazer or as a jacket with long, looped, draping sleeves reminiscent of a kimono. The bottoms, with their assortment of leg holes, may be worn either as trousers or a skirt, shape-shifting between gender markers and cultural markers all in one outfit, according to the wearer's feeling. I'll conclude this section on Yamamoto by saying that this is a designer whose work I have a particular affection for. We currently have a total of just one garment by Yamamoto in the collection, so Mary's gift will greatly enhance our holdings of his work in particular, filling in a major gap in representation. I will wrap up this talk on the whole by saying that I truly love each of these designers and could have spent an hour talking about any one of them individually. This introduction has been by no means exhaustive, but I hope it has piqued your curiosity and brought some insight into the background and the works of these major talents. Thank you again for the invitation to speak about them and for your time and attention.
Time for Q&A.
Yes.
Okay. For the recording, I will be repeating the questions since it doesn't pick up you in the audience on that. So who would like to be the first to ask a question? How do we see this fashion collection interacting with other collections within the museum?
Yep.
Okay.
So as Helen shared, Mary was instrumental in collecting 20th century Japanese prints, and in being lucky enough to visit her home, I've seen some of that collection of hers there as well. There are definitely connections there to tease out, and it will be exciting to work with our curator of prints here to begin to draw out those connections.
Mm-hmm. Well, Cynthia was working with Amy Dehan. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've been able to get to Gallery 136 with modern Japanese ceramics and to see the pairing of, I think we had 3 times pairing 2 outfits from the fashion department.
I'll push back a little bit. That's actually Mackenzie and I working together as in our capacity as curatorial assistants for fashion and decorative arts. Mm-hmm. And that was a project that we got to conceive of and mount together. So those intersections with contemporary ceramics are definitely really exciting projects to continue exploring. Yeah.
I was kind of shocked when I went through the gallery the other day and there weren't any dresses. They changed out the ceramics, but they didn't put any dresses in.
Not this time around, but next time.
Next time, okay. And that changes about every 6 months, right?
Those ceramics will be up for the year, for this year. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. More questions? So what is it like to wake up and make a decision in the shape-shifting collection about what happens with the sleeve you might not be using or another part of the garment you're not using? What happens?
Well, I can say what I think, which is that because of the free-flowing cut of these garments, they still allow for a huge range of movement, and I don't think that the extra appendages become too cumbersome, but I don't know, Mary, do you have anything to say about wearing the great Yohji suit? Very wearable. Very wearable.
Very wearable.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was, yeah, that's a hallmark of all of their designs for sure, is to create clothes that enable movement through life. But the idea of shape shifting between gender expressions and between daily feeling really is something that appeals to me.
So the question is, did some of these fashions have accessories that went with them, such as hats or jewelry?
Yes, Mary's collection is head to toe, so shoes, hats, jewelry in some cases, bags, all kinds of accessories, and then also a number of volume of ephemera will enter the collection with those pieces as well.
Okay, so the question is that you saw an exhibit in Seattle that deconstructed the pieces so you could see when they were cut but before they were put together, and you had an idea of what went into the actual structure of the garment. Okay.
Possibly. That I'm not sure without knowing the exhibit specifically. It sounds like maybe there were materials sourced from the design houses themselves, which accompany garments, but I'm definitely interested in dynamic methods of display and of exhibiting fashion. So when we have the gallery, I'm very keen to experiment with the way that we show things and not just statically display on a mannequin necessarily. So I would certainly hope to show pieces in a way that gives people a greater understanding of how they're put together.
Were you involved with the Kyoto Costume Institute when we had that show, Megan?
No, that was early in my time here. So I worked with Cynthia on marketing the show, but I was not in the curatorial department yet.
At that point, they actually showed how a Western garment was put together versus how a Japanese kimono was put together. And
That
they
was
were
a great
specifically talking about waste and the waste that happens with so many American garments versus, I know my own research in Issey Miyake, he did amazing things to reduce waste in cutting fabric and creating his fashions. And it was for me, and when I did tours for the public, a very important part of that particular exhibit to show that difference. And people were fascinated. So many people don't think about how their clothes are put together. And I used to sew, so I had a better idea.
Yeah, Miyake has been
Forefront.
Yeah, at the forefront of textile developments and textile manufacturing. Like I said, his APOC line was kind of envisioned as a way to manufacture with zero waste. He was also one of the first designers to think about recycling polyester, recycling textiles, to remove those sort of single-use plastic fabrics from the waste stream and bring them back into something wearable.
My understanding too is on the pleats, chemicals used to pleat them, he worked with a chemical engineer to make sure it was as environmentally unaffecting. I'm losing my words today.
Yeah,
but
as
it didn't have as much
environmentally
environmental impact by having better chemicals with the processing. He did almost a year of experimenting, I think, with pleats, to get it right.
Yeah, it was, probably a year with developing those chemicals, but it was an ongoing exploration to get to the eventual manufacture that they arrived at.
Right. I'm scanning. Yes.
I just wondered, did Mary ever wear the clothes, or was it
Yes.
just for the collection?
Mary. She wore them all the time. Okay.
Lived in. Yeah.
When we had that small collection up at the beginning, I'm like, oh, I remember when she wore that at that opening. And truthfully, I'm wearing this today because of Mary. When you see me at the reception, I bought this strictly for the fabric. It was also $5 at a flea market in Kyoto. But it was one of those, I can't envision how to wear it. I know how it goes on a kimono, but I didn't know. Mary came to an opening with one of these in a black turtleneck and a string of pearls, and I went, I can do that. So, yes, I think everything in your collection you have worn. Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you. Great question. Great question. Considering body movement, and then I think you mentioned one particular.
Claire McCardle.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I have never come across express mention of Claire McCardle or like her contemporary Bonnie Cashin. They were very also concerned with this idea of unconstricted movement. Yohji Yamamoto in particular has referenced Madeleine Vionnet, so much earlier in the 1920s, but in terms of creating a free-flowing silhouette, that's one American designer who I've seen him specifically reference.
Okay. And Claire was mostly sportswear, wasn't she?
Yeah, Claire McCardle was early American sportswear.
Yeah, right. Ruth,
I
again.
think that Issey Miyake designed for at least one dance company, if not more, and some of his most well-known photographs are of dancers in those clothes in dances and things. So whether he thought at the beginning that that's what he was doing, he was taken on by dance companies and found to be a nice match. I'm not sure about the other two, but I know he had that.
Yeah, Miyake was very tuned in to collaborating with dance companies, with performers. Grace Jones, very famously, is still a huge fan of his clothing. But yeah, a lot of his work not only was used to dress dancers, but in his collaborations with Irving Penn, the fashion photographer, we have all kinds of beautiful documentation of those clothes in movement. Yeah.
The Olympics are on, and I used to teach history of photography, and designers picked up a lot of work once color television began to show the Olympic figure skating, because suddenly color made a huge difference in the TV and the marketing of it. And so there were a lot of fashion designers that owe a good part of their work to color television.
Miyake actually, before pleats, it wasn't a pleated garment or anything, but he designed, I think it wasn't Japan, I think it was Romania's ski uniforms for a Winter Olympics in the late 60s, I believe. So that crossover was there as well.
Looking good against the snow.
Yeah.
And Stephen.
Let's not forget Steve Jobs.
Yes. Yeah, the humble black turtleneck, but very well designed.
If you didn't hear that, Miyake dressed Stephen Jobs, whatever it is, and that famous mock turtleneck was Miyake's design. So he could go pretty crazy and pretty simple.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Did we have one more? Yeah.
So the question's about the fabric, and was it all synthetics, or were there some natural fabrics like silk and wool?
Yeah, good question. So Miyake's pleats are all polyester. Other than that, though, perhaps notwithstanding my particular selection here, the designers did use natural materials and do still. Yohji Yamamoto in particular uses silk frequently. And in some of those bustle coats, you can see silk taffeta. He uses wool gabardine for pretty much all of his suiting. And Miyake's early designs, like those looser cut pieces, were pretty much all cotton or linen, and Kawakubo works in a full range of natural and synthetic fibers. Yeah.
How many pieces are in Mary Baskett's collection, or the whole collection? Mary's collection. How many pieces are in Mary's collection?
It's a good question. I haven't, I guess, totted them all up yet. Yeah, I think we're looking at probably more than 200 all in all, with accessories and such counted together. I should remember that people always want to know numbers. But yeah, it's a significant contribution.
Let's thank Megan before I do this one. Great talk. Great talk.